I just want to let.
No, relief is the.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And his glasses.
We are ready to start the meeting, and I'm going to make sure we start as much on time as possible to accomplish the important decisions in front of us. We are on the air now. I mean, we can either pick a site for this or not today.
No.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Bender. I am the president of the Minneapolis City Council. Welcome to City Hall this afternoon. I'm going to call to order our adjourned meeting of the City Council for September 26th. I will ask the clerk to please call the roll of council members.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Here.
Jenkins.
Here.
Schrader. Absent. Warsami. Absent. Cunningham.
Present.
Ellison.
Present.
Goodman.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Palmisano.
Present.
Gordon.
Here.
Kano.
Here. We can't talk about this.
Reich is absent. Warsami.
Present.
Here.
President Bender.
Here.
There are 11 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. This is a continuation of our regular meeting from this past Friday, and we have adopted that agenda at that meeting. We have one request to amend the agenda to add one item of business submitted by the city clerk, and you have a copy of that request at your desks. This is a resolution to accept a gift from Greater MSP to pay for the council vice president to travel to Atlanta to represent the city of Minneapolis and receiving an award recognizing the city's BTAP program at the International Economic Development Council's conference this coming weekend. Are there any further amendments to our agenda? Seeing none, I'll recognize the vice president for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? On approval, please say aye.
Aye.
That carries, and the agenda is adopted as amended. So without objection, I'd like to take up the resolution for gift acceptance first so that we can do that and move on to the important presentation before us. I will move that item. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Warsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries, and the resolution is adopted. I want to acknowledge that we have folks who are here to speak. We are not able to take public testimony at this adjourned council meeting today. That would require a motion to suspend the rules, and we have a very short period of time to hear from staff and make this important decision today. However, I want to note that I am happy to stay after this meeting, and I know a number of my colleagues are in contact with the folks who are experiencing this issue ongoing from friends. I want to acknowledge the elected officials that we have in the room today, in addition to our city council members. Please welcome Terrence Tibbetts, chairman of the White Earth Tribe, Alan Roy, the secretary and treasurer of the White Earth Tribal Council, and Raymond Aganash from White Earth. We have Farron Jackson Sr. from the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, the chairman of their tribal council. We have Eugene Tibbetts here, the White Earth district representative on the White Earth Tribal Council, and Samuel Strong, the secretary of the Red Lake Nations Tribal Council. And thank you so much for joining us today.
So who's going to meet with us, with me or us, to let us know that my people, we won't be visit come September 3rd?
I am happy to meet with you. I will have my staff.
Because I need it in writing. I need it in writing and everything, because the city took these funds, you all put us in a situation to where over 40 to 50 families are being asked to vacate by September 3rd.
And as you know, many council members have been engaged in this issue for a long period of time. We cannot take public testimony at this meeting and finish the business that's before the committee. Many of us, I am happy to talk with you after the meeting.
Somebody has to let us know something.
The only other order of business is under the order of reports from standing committees, and that is a follow-up to a series of staff directions that were originally made at the Housing Policy and Development Committee at its meeting on September 12th. Those have continued to come forward at various meetings through the regular council this past Friday. We are not able to take public testimony at this meeting and finish the business before this committee. I am happy. I will be here all night. I am happy to stay and talk with you.
There's no how.
So we need to move on to the staff presentation. That was the reason that we called this emergency special meeting of the Minneapolis City Council today. Any council member could make a motion to suspend the rules. I do not see a motion. So we need to be able to recognize our city coordinator to present to the staff. If we do not make a decision today on the site plan, we have another meeting in 2 weeks.
What would you do if it was you and Buckingham in this situation?
I am happy to meet with you.
So you don't understand. You're not sitting there wondering, okay, what's going to happen September 30th? October 1st. You're not worried about that.
We literally can't have a public hearing today and finish the business of the committee. We can't.
Y'all took his license. You all from the city next that the city needs to
Yeah. There are a number of council members who are telling me they are happy to meet. Councilmember Ellison, who we worked with to find homes for the other displaced tenants. I'm literally telling you we can't hear you right now and that we will meet another time.
You guys have simply ignored what she said. If y'all would have gave her 2 minutes of your time, listen to what she said, she wouldn't be here. Period. All y'all had to do was hear her out. That was it. And you had meetings with the mayor.
Council President.
Mayor, I had met with me and my mayor.
I'll recognize Councilmember Ellison.
I just wanted to say, like, I've dealt with this. I've dealt. I know. I'm just. I'm here to be at the table. You know, I know that we had this experience with Khan, and I've tried my best early in my term to go toe to toe with these slumlords. I'm happy to do the same with friends. I'm happy to be able to meet with you and to talk about this. You guys know that I'm good for that, and that I'm down to be at the table to fight these slumlords. But we do have a situation that we've got to move on this item so that we can get as many people who are currently living at the camp. And I'm here. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you. But this is
4 days to vacate.
I'll take a meeting right after this. I don't have an answer right. I don't have an answer right this second.
Can I get somebody to say something?
All right.
We're gonna meet after this.
We're not going to not allow.
We've got. This is a special
we have
meeting
two choices.
to make one motion to move so that we can help these folks at this camp. I'm just asking that we can handle this business. We've got to move to approve a site to support folks at the camp.
So we're 15 minutes into our meeting and we have not finished our one agenda item.
Did all y'all hear this?
We are very clear.
Expressing her voice. Acknowledge that she's here and she's human.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all she asked.
Thanks for coming. We heard you very well, and we'll get somebody to help
And
you.
I'm willing to meet after
Regulatory
this meeting
Services
is over.
Director's on the way over right now.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay? That's just.
Okay, so there's another meeting in this particular space at 4 p.m. We have 6
thank
council
you.
members who said they were willing to meet.
Okay.
Councilmember Ellison, Cunningham, Bender, Jenkins, Kano, and Gordon. Thank you, and thank you. Okay. So this brings us back to our adjourned meeting. We have one item left on our agenda. We are inviting up our city coordinator, Noria Rivera Vandermeid, to help open up the staff presentation. And the purpose of this meeting today is to hear more from staff about the site of a potential temporary navigation center. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council President and Council. My name is Noria Rivera Vandermeid. I'm the city coordinator. I will be extremely brief as I will pass the baton on to David Frank, who is our executive director of CPED. The staff has been looking, as pursuant to your staff direction and your instructions last week, continuing to think about a site at which we could house a temporary navigation center moving forward. And we believe we have some good news as we to present to you today. David?
Good afternoon, Madam President, council members. David Frank from CPED. Just as a reminder, The way I thought I'd walk you through the work that we have done, and I'll be very brief, just as a reminder to set the context, and then evaluate the additional couple sites that have come to our attention, including the one that has been in the news, is to review the site options, right? I'll put up my map in just a moment, and then talk about the site development, how long that will take, how long that will cost, and then talk about the operations of the Interim Navigation Center. So just bear with me one moment, I'll set up a map. As that zooms out, you'll see that it's the same map that you saw last time with the addition of one additional site, the Red Lake Nation site, and I will spend more time on that in just a moment. So I need to say again, David Frank from CPED, there's no perfect site. This is an emergency. We don't usually do things this way. We would prefer to be a lot more thorough and speak to a lot more people. I know, for instance, there are property owners here today who we have not had a chance to speak to. I've heard indirectly about some concerns, and I have some recommendations for you. In this context, I will quickly recap what we talked about last time about 2600 Minnehaha, the Roof Depot parking lot, mention a piece of county property we took a look at the request of several of you, and then focus the rest of the time on the Red Lake Nation site, 2109 Cedar, and other addresses.
Mr. Frank, I apologize for interrupting.
Yes.
I neglected to mention at the beginning of the meeting that we do have translation services available in room 319 in Somali Spanish and in Hmong. And I know there are a number of folks in the room now able to watch this with translation services, and everyone is welcome to join them if needed.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a very quick recap of the sites we focused on last time. 2600 Minnehaha is a site shown on this map, owned by the city of Minneapolis, about 1.5 acres, immediately available, zoned industrial, remediated to an industrial standard, adjacent, as we spent some time on, adjacent and nearby to 2 charter schools, and that the closest residential properties are about 2.5 blocks away. The Roof Depot parking lot, which we also spent a great deal of time on last time, is 1.9 acres, city-owned, immediately available, also zoned industrial, not remediated, across the street from residential properties, we believe not nearby to schools, and is interrelated with the city's decision about siting the water yard. I will mention just quickly that we did, at the request of several council members, look into the Hennepin County-owned property at Lake and Hiawatha on the question of would that work out. And there are 2 pieces there. One is the existing building at 2225 Lake Street, right? 2225 East Lake. And the timing will not work out with the Minneapolis Public Schools vacating of that property, not until the end of this year. And as to the parking lot surrounding that building, there is not enough room between the current parking demands there, the staging for the upcoming construction project, and this interim navigation center. So we considered it, but we do not stand in front of you proposing that it's a good idea for you to keep considering it. The last site, and the one that's been in the news, is what's labeled here as the Red Lake Nation site, and I will now put up a more detailed map of that property. So first, let me describe what you're seeing here. In red is, and that's only by coincidence, is the Red Lake Nation property ownership. It's several parcels. The city of Minneapolis owns at the north end of the triangle, closest to the Franklin Avenue LRT station. And in between is private property owned by the Cedar Box Company. They also own property on the other side of the street. So the green is third-party ownership, not owned by Red Lake Nation, not owned by the city of Minneapolis, and also not shown in color on this map, I'm going to point now, is here at the bottom, is right-of-way property currently owned by the state of Minnesota and in the process of being turned back to the city of Minneapolis, and turned back, we believe, in the month of October. So we have considered that property as available for this use if you choose to locate the interim navigation center here. Excuse me. So adding together the city-owned property at the north, more on that in a minute, the Red Lake Nation site ownership, and that property to the south I just pointed at, the property is about 1.25 acres. You remember the other two sites were about 1.5, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 acres. So it's about 1.25 acres. It's zoned OR3, which is a bit of technicality, but the good news is to accommodate this use, we would not need to rezone as we would on some of the other properties we've talked about. The site is not remediated, and I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on this in a moment. Neither the site the city owns, nor the right-of-way we're getting back, nor the Red Lake Nation site has been environmentally remediated. And there are timing and cost issues with that I'll talk about in just a moment. So if you choose to proceed with this site, we could locate the interim navigation center on grade. Okay, so I'm about to describe how a demolition process would work, but what you should picture in the end, and I'll show you a layout in a moment, is that the interim navigation center would be located at grade, not in any of the existing buildings. This site is close to the current encampment location. As I mentioned, it's adjacent to the Franklin Station on the Blue Line. We would, as you know, be working in partnership with Red Lake Nation, and as you've heard, Sam Strong is here, as well as parts of his development team. It's not immediately adjacent to a residential neighborhood. Let me spend a few minutes on timing. There are existing tenants in these buildings, and the ends of those leases are not until the end of October. Okay, so after the leases are over, then could begin a process to remediate the environmental condition of the buildings, which is necessary before they're demolished, and they would be demolished just to grade in the interest of time. So we believe that there are underground structures that would need to be removed later, but in the interest of time, if you choose this site for the interim navigation center, just demolish the buildings to grade and then do the site work, including, as we discussed last time, and again, I'll show you a layout, the fencing, the lighting, security, and the temporary structures to accommodate the interim navigation center. Everything that I just said adds up to time. And so if you choose this site, the timing to have this, the interim navigation center operating here would be early December, okay? Because of the things I just named, and I can run through those again if you have questions. You should also know that come this coming spring, Red Lake Nation is moving ahead with city support and from other local and state and county funders on an affordable housing project, and they are planning to break ground. If this hadn't happened, they would be planning to break ground on this site at the end of May. So those two things suggest a 6-month period during which an interim navigation center on this site would be operating from, let's say, early December through May. That's 6 months. Any questions, or should I keep going? Okay. We have evaluated, as you know, last time, the cost and timing to have the other sites done. So I should tell you that as to the timing, we still believe that on either the Roof Depot parking lot or at 2600 Minnehaha, from when you tell us to go, that would be between 30 and 60 days, 1 and 2 months. That's still the case, but we obviously have not begun. And the cost for those sites, and we believe the cost for this site, are between $2 and $2.5 million. That includes let me tell you what that does and doesn't include. We said this last time, say it again. That does include the capital to create the interim navigation center. That does include, I'll call it property management, but does not include the services, the navigation part of the interim navigation center. We are meeting with the development team and potential partners tomorrow to start to talk about operations and costs, and we'll have more on that for you. But at the moment, that's not included in that $2 to $2.5 million number. I mentioned the timing, and that's a key difference. Let me take a moment to show you the layout and keep going.
Councilmember Gordon has a question.
Yes.
And I'll try not to ask too many questions, but I certainly have some. I know we're trying to get through this quickly. I don't quite understand why we can't use some of the buildings that are already standing. I've talked to people who've been in them not that long ago and felt that they were that they weren't necessarily dangerous or toxic, and you're telling us that there are actually tenants in the buildings. So what's the rationale for saying they have to be demolished? Especially the larger, I think there's a larger building there actually that maybe, so the buildings may be different, and I admit that, and be in different levels of stability or security.
Madam President, Councilmember Bender, Councilmember Gordon, we have taken a look at that. In order to have a navigation center and have people in a safe and accessible and not dealing with the environmental condition of the buildings, we have taken the approach that the buildings can't be there. And I hear you and understand that a person hearing about this would think, well, there are buildings, we should use those, but these are industrial buildings. I've not personally been inside, but the condition isn't such that you'd want to move people in who are vulnerable and in need of a lot of care and assistance.
Sounds like there's not a lot of hard data there to back up that impression and that decision, but I appreciate that. I also have another question about, have we talked to the tenants about being vacating sooner? I have to say the biggest problem with me hearing about this now is December, and I know how we operate. Sometimes we tend not to shorten our deadlines. We tend to extend them. And that is absolutely not what I think we can do here. So some of these tenants must be, with a little bit of help, is it storage? What's going on in there? And I don't know if anybody can help answer that, but I understand there's lease and there's lease terms, but let's say we said, move your stuff over to the Roof Depot parking lot and we'll store it for you or something. So have you asked that? Have you looked at that at all?
Madam President, Councilmember Gordon, Sam Strong is here who's the owner, and he can perhaps comment on that.
Well, we have been in discussion with them about moving earlier. They're very open to it. I think, as he described, there is some remediation that needs to occur prior to demolition. And so the idea would be that he vacates the properties that need the remediation first. And the reality is, I think we can get that done very quickly. The barrier is probably not him leaving. It's probably getting all of the permits and everything in place to do the remediation. So I think, in fact, that barrier can be easily overcome. And that timeline can be moved up to maybe even next week, as early as next week is what we've talked about.
Well, that is wonderful news.
Keep going. I'm putting the very rough layout on the screen, and I need to have some caveats on it right away. What I want you to know is that we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have used the Red Lake Nation property. We have used, at the bottom of your picture here, the soon-to-be Minneapolis right-of-way, turned back from the state of Minnesota. We have not used the Cedar Box property. That's in the middle. That's the dark box and then the white area. And although we are currently showing in this image some trailers on the north property, we believe that we can find space to site those trailers, which are intended for services, on the Red Lake Nation property and on city property, which is not that north triangle. We think it would be less impactful to the operations of the Cedar Box Company that will have a whole new use right next to them if you choose this site. And we think it would be better not to have the trailers on that north city property. So with that caveat, the main thing I want you to see here is that we think we could fit a similar number, roundly 150 people on this site should you choose it.
And Mr. Frank, just a clarifying question. I think from the presentation we had at the Housing Policy and Development Committee, my understanding from our staff and partners is that once and if we are able to choose a site, then there would be some more detailed planning about what kinds of structures would come in, and those may be trailers or they may not be, and that decision would be made collectively by the tribal council if it is on their land, in addition to the city and the county and our other partners.
Madam President, thank you for the reminder. That's in my notes right here. Yes, while what's shown in the layouts that we showed you last week and today are trailers, because that's the module we've been using to do the layout, yes, it is the case that there are smaller sprung structures and other housing types, other shelter types, other structure types, thank you, that we could use if the pricing allows it. So schedule, price, but yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, I had some feedback on this, and it was also on the other designs. I've heard consistently and noticed in some of the other navigation centers that there were some other things provided, including a way to make food and distribute food, and also to do laundry. I think these will be demands, and when I look at this 54 times 3, those 3 structures in and of themselves as 150 beds.
Yep.
So, and I'm not sure what's in the services. My assumption earlier was services are where we're going to have county workers and other professionals and health care providers and those things, not laundry. Mm-hmm. So I just want to put out there, it's probably going to work a lot better if there's not only laundry, but some kind of food preparation ability, but also secure storage. And I think we talked about secure storage, and theoretically they could maybe fit under the beds or in those buildings. But I want those other things to be out there as important, and other people have noted that they would be important too.
Madam President, Councilmember Gordon, we have heard those comments from you and other council members, and I thank you for the reminder on those things. And as to the food, I should point out that is another thing that we have not yet figured out, right? So we have done very rough layouts, very rough site plans to show how could it work, right? But there are lots of details to be considered, including all the many issues, health and otherwise, that come with providing food service. So that's not included either in what's shown in the site plan or possibly in the budget. We understand that that's on the list. The last thing, Council President Bender, that I would say is we're here to answer questions. We've given you the costs as we understand them, the schedule as we understand them, the issues as we understand them with these sites. Happy to answer any questions. The one thing that I would say, again, in the spirit of what we just heard at the Housing Policy and Development Committee, is that while the city has been leading with strong support from our partners and property owners, developers, we believe that as we transition to the operations phase, that we are best as participants and supporters and not as leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, I think it may be helpful at this time to ask if the folks from the Tribal Council of Red Lake or others would like to help us understand a bit more about the site and the project that was described briefly about the long-term housing.
Well, Buju Bimoseganu and Indigenous Makwandu Dem, Misquagamarizagandanjuba. I'm Sam Strong. I'm here representing the Red Lake Nation. I also want to recognize my 2 tribal leaders here from White Earth and Leech Lake, as well as the other tribal leaders that were present. I do also want to state that we originally met with the mayor last week. At the time, there was, I think, 10 tribal nations from the state of Minnesota present, all of which were in support of the proposal that we're going to bring forward here today. First and foremost, I want to say, Miigwech, thank you for taking a look at this issue. You know, it's not something that happened today or last year or even in the 2000s. You know, in the 1950s, they relocated natives from reservations to Minneapolis and other urban areas. It was a termination policy. You know, obviously it didn't work, but what it did do was it created a segment of our populations that are here in the cities that for decades and decades have experienced homelessness. And so I want to thank you guys for finally not sweeping us back under the rug. And not just Native people, but other ethnicities as well. This isn't a Native problem, a white or black problem. It's a human problem. And I think we're very cognizant of that from the Red Lake Nation. And I think if any people are to bring forth something that brings a solution to this, I think Native people are some of the best leaders to be inclusive and not exclusive in our solutions. So I first want to say that, and I want to thank the other communities that have come forward. And, you know, it's important that we recognize that, this isn't just let's put them in somewhere else and deal with the issue. It's a long-term systemic problem that is plaguing our communities here and is causing for many problems to arise for all of us. So I want to state that also. And also I want to recognize that, between us three tribes here, we represent a large percentage of the population of Native people in the state here. And all three of our tribes are experiencing these problems here at home and in urban areas. And so, although we come to the table with solutions, I also want you to recognize that many of our people live in poverty. And for us to come to the table with our limited resources, it's taxing on our communities as well. So I want you to recognize that as we move forward and make sure that you guys take a lead in making this solution become long-term. And so from our standpoint, we've been working on this project for multiple years now. In fact, the city has distributed a large portion of the project from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so from that, we save Miigwech. And we've also been working with many state and county entities to get this project funded. And we do intend on building this project next summer. Not only is it serving the population that is currently homeless, we will have 20 homeless units in our project, but it's also providing low-income housing, a much-needed commodity here in the city. So, it's very important that we do move forward. I think it's very reasonable to assume that if we come together and not only talk about solutions, but bring resources to the table, that we can come up with some meaningful solutions. And moving them to any one of these sites, in my eyes, is not a long-term solution. And in some ways, by us having a deadline of next summer, I think it helps us come up with real solutions and real ideas to a problem that is really facing all of our communities. So I first want to say that. I want to take a second here to ask my other tribal leaders to step up. I think it's very important that as tribal nations, you respect us individually too. So I want to take a couple moments, then I'll finish with our presentation here.
Buju. Nigani Musaya Darsdakas. Gawa Baba Gana Kagish Kanagan. Etawash. Doing Jaba. Aquadurum. My name is Terrence Tibbetts. I'm the chairman at White Earth. And as Sam said there, this is a problem that started years ago. And it's not going away. It's only getting bigger and bigger where we can't avoid it any longer. We can't step over it any further. We're willing to come to the table here and sit down and work with the city, work with the county in a collaborative effort. One group I don't see here in the room is Minnesota Housing Finance, which our Minnesota Housing, but also our own Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Housing and Finance Corporation should be here. Giving us a boost in the arm here on some of these supportive housing programs. As we look around, we talked about earlier about supporting Red Lake fully in this site here, but trailer houses, I just don't think that's the right idea right now. It's going to be a quick fix. It's going to be a turnaround. It's going to be a walk away after that. Then you're going to be stuck in FEMA trailers, or that's just they degrade so fast, poorly built. There's formaldehyde in these houses. It's not a safe environment for our people. But us working together, I think, is essential. We've probably got over 100 members ourselves in the camp, and along with Leech Lake, and some of the services that we can provide down here are the wraparound services, the moms, the mats services, the chemical dependencies programs. We have been in the camp and offering Rule 25 assessments, safe and sober environment to live in, to move into after they be accepted into the programs here. But they're very reluctant to go into it. But time is of the essence here also. We're taking a look at, we're going to start weather changing here. It's going to get cold. It's going to get relentless out here within 2 months. It's going to be 20, 30 below. And we're thinking about public safety, about our children, about our vulnerable adults, about our veterans, the ones that are homeless here. These are big issues. So I think working together collaboratively with the city, with the county, and with the other tribes taking the lead here, that we can find a way through this in the long run. Miigwech for your time, council members and committee vice persons. Miigwech.
Thank you.
Anin, Farron Jackson, Senior and Indigenous Cause, Agi Wadin Indigo, Gaza Gaswa Jimmy Cognan Dunjaba, Aniga Minda. Welcome, thanks Council for the time you're allowing us to be heard today. You know, when I'm sitting here thinking about all the dialogue that's being shared, it's kind of a little unfair that it's on your lap, so to speak now. But to me personally, this goes way back to a trust responsibility by the federal government that was supposed to uphold housing agreements to the tribes for surrendering all the land that was taken from the tribes. You talk about the MnDOT property that the homeless camp is on now. That is not officially MnDOT property. That is tribal land. And it's not about pointing the finger or blaming anybody in today's society. It's history that's coming to surface here. This has been a problem that's been brewing for years and years, and it has coming to a head today. And that's what it's about. And it's about coming today and understanding a culture, and it's understanding treaty responsibilities and trust responsibilities. That's what it's about here. We only make up 1% of the state or the nation population base, but yet the indigenous people always fall under the curve. And we got the highest number of members at these camps today, and that's why tribal leaders are very concerned. Our Indian housing block grant that's supposed to provide housing for Native tribes has been dormant and stayed the same since it was established in 1998. Nobody puts any more fundings for the tribes. We wouldn't be here today. We always try to take care of our members. That's what it is. We're always inclusive, like Mr. Strong stated. They offered this land. Is it the perfect spot? We don't think so, but it's the best viable option we have today. And right now, time is of the essence. So that's why I came today. I was here last week with the meeting. We had good dialogue with Mayor Fry, and I was looking forward to this meeting to kind of represent the tribe. We have 10,000 members on Leech Lake. We have a high number that reside down here in the urban area, and it's always been a concern. So I just want to thank you for letting me speak today and let me be a part of this meeting. And I respect and I understand all of the council. You're having all these difficult decisions to make because on tribes we deal with this every day, and it's painful sometimes, But I'm glad we're still coming to the table and we're trying to make something happen here that's going to keep these members from being out in the cold. Miigwech.
Thank you.
So thank you for taking the time to listen to our other leaders. They also wanted me to state that many other tribal leaders are also in support and will be providing letters of support for this initiative as well as participating in the near future. So getting back to our proposal, first and foremost, we do want to make it clear as the Red Lake Nation that we intend on building our housing development next year. So there is a hard deadline there. And that's very important that I communicate that on behalf of my nation. The second piece is that we do expect the city to step up to the table and take a lead in making this possible. I have a suggestion. I'd like to bring forth Becky. If you want to come forward. She's been working with us on the development, and actually she had a really good suggestion that I'd like for her to communicate to you guys on how you can be a better part of leading this initiative. So without further ado, Becky Landon.
I have lots of ideas. I'm not sure exactly which one he's talking about. So.
Delegating the appointed person to lead the initiative.
Oh, after hearing...
We never do that to our staff.
Sorry about that. I'm Becky Landon. I'm a development consultant. I have been working with the Red Lake Nation on the Mino Bimadijawan project for the last 2.5 years. So we've been also working in the last few days on this idea of using the site to house the navigation center. And after hearing the previous update from the city and the county and different departments, well, it seemed like one of the big questions rising to the top was who's going to coordinate the navigation center and who's going to figure out, all the things above the land. The Red Lake Nation is offering the land, but not offering to to coordinate and implement the navigation center. And my idea was that the city contract with a person with that specific experience. And there are a couple of people out there right now in Minnesota that, or in Minneapolis with that experience, who could be brought on to not only set it up, but then to manage it over the next couple of years. So that was the idea.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the reality is, you know, I'm not an expert in this, and I don't think any of you are. So why can't we bring in someone from our city that can lead the effort and give us the best management practices for how to make this work? And so I want to thank Becky. We were just talking about that outside, and I think if we want to move forward, it would be with a structure that has a lead person. You know, sometimes with bureaucracies, it takes too much time to make anything happen. And so in this way, it empowers the city council as well as all of us to get behind someone that knows what they're doing. And so I think that's very important in moving forward. Now I want to speak a little bit more about the timing. We have talked to the current tenant. They are open to suggestions. Also, we could help them in making their move. There's no one actually living there, and so I want to make that clear. They're just a storage company. So in many ways, it's just moving current storage pods, et cetera, out of the most impacted. When I say impacted, the ones that need the remediation most immediately. And so that's going to take some time. Also, for us to make that happen, we need to work closely with the Minnesota Department of Health, the MPCA, and demo and permitting, as well as have someone from probably the mayor's office reach out to Excel Energy to expedite their portion of the project. So I do think it's possible. It is going to take some time. You know, I think realistically, you know, at a minimum, we're looking at 6 weeks. It could be longer depending on how quickly we can get through the permitting process. That's really the main barrier at this point. You know, the remediation and demo can be done quickly. It's a matter of getting it set up that's going to take some time. We do think that timeline can be moved forward some. I don't have an exact day here, but I can tell you this, every day we wait, you know, it's going to push it back even farther. You know, I do think it's possible to get them in there prior to the big freeze. You know, obviously there might need to be some short-term accommodations. You know, I can't forecast the weather. I don't think anyone else here can. So it is going to take a little bit of a thought process. If something does occur, if there is some kind of weather system that comes in, that how we can alleviate those concerns. So there is going to be some thinking in terms of that. But other than that, I think it's something that can work in the short term, as well as start a process of looking at this problem as a whole. You know, I mean, you've heard it from everyone sitting here. You know, we want to see a solution, and I know you guys do too. But for that to really happen, you know, we need some ongoing dialogue, some ongoing support, and we're willing to step to the table. I think we've showed our support for this, and I think it's important now that, you know, you guys delegate that same responsibility to your staff, and I think that's one of the reasons we wanted that appointee. Other than that, I think, you know, we're very interested in being a part of the solution. As Becky spoke to, our intent is not to manage the facility, you know, and as a tribe, we do have to be very mindful of our resources and how to serve our people best. But at the same time, we are coming to the table with a lot, and I think it's important now that everyone else comes back to the table with a similar commitment to making this problem get better. So other than that, do you have any questions or any concerns?
Are there any questions for Mr. Strong? Councilmember Gordon. Councilmember Cunningham.
All right. First, I just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Strong, for this. Councilmember Ellison and I really related to what you were saying about a community that is experiencing scarcity, then having to provide then support for folks who are in need. We were putting our heads together to figure out if there was somewhere in North that we could help provide support. And folks were, you know, we were like, oh man, folks are going to be like, we're already struggling so hard. But that's how we build power. That's how we build transformational solidarity. In our last meeting that we had having this conversation, I talked about building solidarity. So when you opened with, we are inclusive, you know, we are not exclusive, I have to say that really, like, that meant a lot to me, because there are Black folks at that encampment, and it's super important to me as somebody who is holding solidarity to not say, oh, not the Native folks, pay attention to Black folks, right? Like, because erasure has been a part of it, and a part of the oppression, and I understand that. And so I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for stepping up. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to be able to make it work. Like I said, we were putting our heads together. But as someone who really is committed to a good outcome, not only with this encampment, but homelessness in general across our communities, I just want to say thank you, and we are here to support you as well. So thank you.
Good.
Councilmember Gordon, did you have a question?
I didn't necessarily have a question. I was ready to move forward with a motion that everybody should have before you.
Thank you. I do want to just say publicly a couple of things that Mr. Strong and I have talked about privately. The first is that the city is very committed to honoring the needs of the tribe on this site and on the sacred land where you intend to build something that's so important to the community. And that will come in detail in the form of a memorandum of understanding or legal contracts. I also talked with our housing staff today, who are those who manage the funding that would come through the city portion of the permanent project. And those staff are working closely with the tribal council to make sure that we don't jeopardize that project or its funding in any way. Right. So those things are happening and will be important to continue. As city government, as any kind of government, we often have specific constraints. And so we'll have to work together to understand, do some of us have contracting constraints that'll take longer that maybe others don't, but I think we'll be able to work together and shuffle around our various strengths and constraints to make this happen if the site is chosen. And I think I speak for all of us when I say we can't thank you enough, all of you in the tribal councils and the tribal nations, to come forward now at this time and bring us this partnership and this collaboration and this solution. So thank you.
Good.
Councilmember Gordon.
If I may say, Ms. President, I appreciate every one of you taking the time to listen to us and come within collaboration. This is what we need. We wish.
Well, thank you very much. And this is assuming that the staff report and the presentation is over. I think that we've heard a lot about this site, and I think I'm ready to make a motion to say that we're going to work to put the navigation center at this location. And there's a motion before you. There's maybe I could read the whole thing. I do want to note particularly that one of the first items we talk about is project management. And I think there's an understanding that as the project management decision is made, we'd certainly work with the property owner and in partnership and do that. But I think that our professional staff, and I think all of us totally agree with the idea that, no, we need to find somebody who can operate this for us. So here's the full staff direction. I'll read it and just bear with me. Staff is directed to work with the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians, hereafter referred to as the developer, and the coalition formed in partnership with representatives from the Minnesota Interagency Council on Homelessness, Hennepin County, and community partners, including the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors, to develop the lots located at 2105, 2109, 2113, Cedar Avenue South, and 1820, 22nd Street East. Mr. Frank, make sure I have the right addresses, as the site for a temporary navigation center to serve persons transitioning out of the current Hiawatha encampment. This work should include, but not be limited to, the following. 1, project management services. It will make the site ready with a date mutually agreed upon by the coalition and any additional funding partners. 2, preparation of an operations and programming plan agreed upon by the coalition, the developer, and other partners, that includes service delivery, transitional support, staffing, and other operations and/or management support. 3, preparation of a finance plan for both capital and operating costs with a clear delineation of costs to be borne by the city and costs to be borne by other partners. I'm looking at you two over there, and others, along with funding sources for the same. And 4, plans to mitigate off-site impacts of the navigation center on nearby properties. And staff is further directed to report back on the above to the Housing Policy and Development Committee by October 24th, 2018. And I believe, because this is a council meeting, I'll require a second before we can enter into discussion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on Councilmember Gordon's motion? Councilmember Kano.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate all the community members who have stepped up today to help us solve this issue. As you know, we've been debating this for a minimum of 1.5 weeks publicly, and certainly feverishly in our council meeting rooms and other areas to try to come up with a solution that works for everyone. I do want to say that the report back date of October 24th feels far away to me. I'm not going to amend the staff direction just because I feel like there is a pretty clear mandate to solve this issue as soon as possible. And I know that over the weekend, Councilmembers Ellison and Councilmember Fletcher were able to connect personally with Sam Strong, and we're all in communication via text. And so if you do come up against any barriers, please reach out to us. Please make us, hold us accountable to the vision that we're putting forward here together today. I think many of us want to be able to lift any stones that are impeding our way to ensure that this gets built and that this gets done with community vision and with community support grounding this effort. So I just want to say that I don't like the October 24th report back time. I wish it was the 10th, but I do want to give people time to just do the work. And let's just do the work. Let's just get to it. And I want to acknowledge publicly the work of our mayor too in this, in that I believe that he has been a clear leader in addressing this issue. And we have a strong team with the council and the mayor addressing this affordable housing crisis. And so again, you probably have his contact information and can reach out to him if you feel like there's any stumbling blocks or any lack of seriousness in addressing this particular concern. So I'm happy to support this. I thank all my colleagues who listened, to all the Latino community members who came, all the Native American people who came, and all of the residents who have been engaged on this issue. One last note is that there is a lot of interest from community partners to be a part of the solution. And so figuring out ways that our decision-making tables can be broader and bigger to ensure that there are residents from the camp at the table helping to make decisions, that there are people from our street outreach teams and our outreach workers who are informing the strategies and the work that we're doing. Because I think part of the problem we're seeing is that some of these decision-making tables have been disconnected from how things are moving on the ground, and that's why we're now hitting this point in time where some of those things are not as congruent as we would like them to be. So it'd be great to just get more on-the-ground information about how strategies are moving forward and what we can do together to ensure that this issue gets resolved for not only today, but for years to come. So thank you. Sorry, can I just finish? I'm sorry. Yep. Oh, okay. Yes, African American people are involved in this just the same way that, there's lots of mixed race children involved in these conversations, and we can make sure that this is welcoming for all communities. So I just wanted to finish. And say mil gracias to all the Latino parents who came to City Hall for the first time ever to make their voices heard. And as a woman who comes from undocumented families and undocumented workers, it is very important that City Hall make a better effort at engaging that community that gets erased and deported and rated on every day, to make sure we're not only talking about when we want to put something in their community on top of them, but also what is their vision and their dreams for the future. So muchas gracias a todos los que están escuchando aquí hoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kano. I want to note that we scheduled this emergency meeting of the City Council just last week, and so I know council members did their very best to be here for the full time we have until the Board of Estimate and Taxation sets the maximum levy at 4 p.m. If council members need to leave, that is the scheduling issue of why. We have Council Vice President Jenkins and then several other council members waiting to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Strong and the Red Lake Nation for bringing this proposal forward and stepping up, and to all of the tribes represented here today. It's really generous and incredible to see the community stepping up for their own brothers and sisters to get at solving some of these issues. As you noted, they are very long-term issues, very broad in scope, emanating from our federal government's lack of attention to these issues, all the way down to our state government and including the city itself. I had a couple of clarifying questions regarding the site. I know I heard you mention earlier that potentially tenants could move out earlier, but I wasn't clear if that meant that we could use the buildings as they stand, or do they need to be demolished?
I do think that they should be demolished. There are some environmental concerns in the buildings, and to properly serve the residents, I think it would be in the best interest to demolish the buildings. I think the timeline for demolishing it can be moved up. I think the existing tenant could move out of the buildings that need to be remediated first, and in that time frame while they're working on those buildings, remove the rest of their property from the rest of the buildings. So I think that it can work. I do think that to properly serve the members of the encampment in a healthy way, demolishing it is the best course of action.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And so,
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
I've been in these buildings multiple times. We've done extensive studies on lead, asbestos. There are places in these buildings where you can see through the floor to the bottom, to the level below. So they're not suitable buildings to have people living in.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. And then my second thought is, I'm absolutely going to vote in favor of this today, but I have to state that I have to get a commitment from my colleagues that we are going to take the same level of commitment in dealing with all of the other communities, particularly the communities that are showing up here today that are facing eviction within 4 days, the communities that are struggling with addiction and homeless problems all over our city. African American communities, we have opened up this whole can, and now we have to commit to being the part of the solution for this entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Vice President. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, President Bender. And I want to first thank Councilmember Cano for her work on this and for pulling the meeting together that kind of got this conversation started for me, or at least brought me into it this weekend. And I want to thank the tribal leaders for stepping up. I'm so supportive of this, and I really appreciate what you are bringing to this. And I want to thank the leadership from MUD, who were my sort of first contact, who helped communicate with me and get me to the encampment this weekend. And then I really want to recognize, as we think about the assets that we have to work with, as we think about this encampment moving forward, the work that volunteers from NA are doing at that site is one of the assets that we need to make sure is part of the formula, right? I think that I watched them in action. I watched I watched tensions get de-escalated when something happened at one of the tents while I was there, and the role that they are playing is invaluable. It is not perfect or enough when we think about the whole picture of everything. We all have to stumble forward and do all of the work that we can do to make this work, but it has to be part of the mix, and we have to just show, I think, our deep gratitude and respect for the work that everybody's doing to make all of this work. This is going to take everybody. It is going to take everybody, and it is everybody's problem. And so I want to be really clear. We've got to find a 6-month answer now, right? This gives us 6 months instead of 3 weeks, to sort of figure out the next thing. But we have to keep working just as hard as we have been to keep things moving. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that as we move forward on this. And I'm hoping that it opens up more options, that there are things that we can negotiate over 6 months that we weren't able to do when we were thinking about a 2-week timeline. And so we can think about a brick and mortar building. We can think about getting to a good intermediate solution. so that this site can then be part of the long-range solution. But our work is just starting. And so I'm committed to that work. I've spoken with the building trades to talk to them about making sure that there is labor available and that people are thinking about it, and they're committed to figuring out how to support us and making sure this demolition happens on time, seeing what they can do to be helpful. I've been talking with developers and folks in the construction contracting industry to sort of make sure that everybody's ready when we come to ask them for things, if there are things that we need in terms of equipment or support or things that can move this along more quickly. People have been very responsive. And so my message to everybody is that there are people hurting in this community and not just the people at the encampment. And we are about to come to you and ask for things. Every single one of you in the business community, if you have land, if you have skills, if you have extra resources, we are about to come to you and ask for it. The city is going to step up. The tribes are stepping up. This community, we all need to step up, and I'm asking you to get ready to be generous when we ask, because there is a lot of work ahead of us. So this is a great step today, and let's keep getting ready to bring our whole community forward in this effort and get as many people into quality shelter as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher. We have Councilmember Ellison, then Warsami and Gordon.
I'll keep it pretty short. I'm going to be voting in favor of this motion. Obviously, I'd say the thing that really sold me after hearing the news was I was able to go, Councilmember Fletcher and I, and go meet with Sam Strong. And I was super impressed because we walked over to the site and we got some pushback from folks at NA saying, "Hey, you got to be talking to you got to get buy-in from the folks in the camp." And Sam didn't skip a beat. He said, "Cool, let's go walk over there," and sort of emceed an impromptu public forum. And we got buy-in, and it was kind of incredible to watch. And so your leadership has been really important in this whole thing. I'm excited to support this. I also just want to note that, you know, when we don't govern from a place of cynicism, you know, like I think that we were earlier this week saying, well, there's no other options. I think the term, a new solution is not going to magically appear, right? The term magic was used. And I'd say that Red Lake is certainly, this is an act of magic, but I would say that when we don't govern from a place of cynicism, it's amazing what we can get done in just 5 days or a couple more hours. And so the fact that we have 6 months, and the fact that I know that I'm going to be working hard to make sure that we can establish more permanent options, both north side and south side, to make sure that we're supporting all communities, to make sure that we're being inclusive and not erasing any community, right? Now, not erasing the opioid overdoses happening in North Minneapolis or among Black folks in the city. That we are being inclusive. I want to make sure that we continue that fight and we have another 6 months. I also just want to thank thank the folks at NA for the on the ground work that they've been doing. I also want to thank LaDonna Redmond for the work that she's been doing. I was able to spend a couple of hours at the camp with LaDonna as well, and I'm just in awe of the work that she's been able to do in the face of a really tragic loss that she's going through. So thank you, LaDonna. With that, I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Warsami.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to echo all the sentiment and comments that my colleagues have just made. As the council member who represents the ward where you already have the community and where you have the Red Lake Nation site, Ward 6, we're welcoming, we're inclusive, and we will continue welcoming members of our community. And I remember having a conversation with Council President Bender and the mayor playing phone tags on Friday as I was en route to fly out for the weekend. And that's when we heard that this option came. It was confusing. I didn't know exactly what was happening. But then when we looked at it, for me, I was very supportive because it was a community solution to a community problem. It was the community land. It was community organizations that were stepping up. Not just the city, but actually members of the community. So I would like to thank the Red Lake Nation and all the other tribal nations for stepping up and for supporting the community. And, this is a very difficult issue, but we've been working hard on it. And I'm very pleased that we're at this stage, and I'm very supportive of the motion. Thank you to everybody.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I just wanted to note a couple things before we take a vote on this, and I suspect it's a unanimous vote, which is going to feel really great in light of the previous votes on the location of this site. I did want to acknowledge that we've heard concerns about our permitting process and how that might delay things. We heard that loud and clear. The people who need to hear it, I think, heard that. And we're, I think, committed to do whatever we can in any way that we can to make sure that we don't become some problem in slowing down the process. And I want to communicate that clearly. I also wanted to just express my gratitude to Councilmember Ellison, who I think really showed some leadership when decided he would lead the effort to pause this decision after we had made it as a divided council, and it was a very difficult couple of meetings. Clearly, we were divided. There were two sites before us. A good portion of us preferred one site as the first choice, and others preferred the second as the first choice. Neither, I don't think anybody thought they were the great site, but we felt urgency to move forward, and I was even one of us that said we need to move forward. Absolutely. I didn't really like slowing this down, but we did slow it down, and then we held this special meeting, so I really appreciate everybody at the city staff who helped coordinate the timeline for the pause to go by very quickly so that we could kind of let this open up and this miracle happen, I guess, of the new site come forward that we weren't expecting to find. So I think that remember, I guess, colleagues, speak up and keep saying that you're realizing your involvement and you're getting into the middle of us, and our decision-making process can sometimes yield some really great results. We do our better work when we're all engaged in that work and willing to kind of step up and step out and do that. So I appreciate the work of everybody in this and moving forward to this point. We still have a long way to go. I also appreciate all the sentiments that were expressed and all the gratitude expressed to others and the challenge that Councilmember Fletcher issued, I think, to every single member of Minneapolis, if not beyond, to expect to be get involved and engage in this.
Thank you. Is there any other council members who want to speak? Okay. I put myself in queue. I do want to just add a couple of comments. And as I said, if folks have to leave, I know that this was an emergency meeting scheduled. We do have until 4 o'clock when the next meeting starts. So I'll try to be very brief. I do want to just really acknowledge from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the City Council to our staff for how much you are working on this, and it is on top of your already very busy jobs during budget season. And I don't know how many hours a week you are working, but it is too many. And I want to say that you have my commitment to yourselves and to those staff who work for you that this is not going to continue this way for the rest of the term, that when we ask you to do more, we need to give our staff more resources, and it is unacceptable for our city staff to be working this many hours in this kind of crisis situation permanently. And that is, again, just with sincere gratitude for everything you have done. And the same goes to folks in the community. I know there are people who are not sleeping, who are dropping everything and time with your families, who are working for free, who are doing everything you can. And that same goes, the same sentiment applies to folks in the community, folks at the county, and our partners at the state. And we wouldn't be here today at step one of the series of decisions we have to make if it were not for all of that effort and work and time. I also wanted to just honor you today, LaDonna Redmond, and lift up your son. And having seen some of the recent communications, I want to say that as a mom, that if I thought there would have been anything that could have been done to save my child's life, that seems like the deepest pain, and that we stand with you in finding those answers and making sure that this doesn't happen again. And your leadership is really important. And I regret how the meeting began because we are working so closely with our friends at Inquilinos Unidos Pro Justicia, and we understand the urgency of people facing eviction in our city. And my commitment is to stay as long tonight and any other day to take that back up. And then I also just want to say that we will vote now, unless anyone else wants to speak. But I do also just want to see if we can take the next few minutes for our staff to give us a sense of next steps before everyone leaves. Finally, as that's happening, I want to say that I know that Sam and I talked about this on the phone, that we are moving as fast as we can. And sometimes that means we're not doing things as well as we want. And I say that on behalf of the city, not on behalf of the tribal council. And so I just want to thank the folks at the school, at Aurora Community School, who came. And I know that this has been extraordinarily stressful for your community. And this is not normally how we do things. This is not normally how we communicate. And it was done under duress with our intention of doing the best we could with the information we had to move very quickly. And I want to thank you for coming as Councilmember Cano said, many times. And I'm sure that this has created stress at a time when our kids are trying to get back to school. You're trying to get the routines back going. And I apologize for the stress that has caused and the urgency of our meetings. So with that, I'll see if any of my colleagues want to say anything. Yes, absolutely. That was the plan. So I'll call the vote as long as no one else wants to speak. Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll on Councilmember Gordon's motion.
Councilmember Fletcher.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Borsami.
Aye.
Cunningham.
Aye.
Ellison.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Kano.
Aye.
Reich.
Aye.
President Bender.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
That carries and that motion is adopted. Thank you very much. We have a few minutes left of this meeting. The next meeting is to set our tax levy, which is how we get money to pay for these things. So it's an important meeting coming at 4. But we do have Ms. Rivera Vandermeide here to just give us a brief overview of our next steps. And I know folks will be leaving, and that's okay.
Chair Bender, council members, just briefly wanted to say that we too are so pleased at the vote and to have a path moving forward. Our next steps, and I wanted to say this very clearly, is to move with urgency. Just because of this vote today does not mean that we forget and we don't move with the same alacrity and nimbleness and agility that we've been doing. So we will be meeting with our partners, state, county, MUD, our tribal partners as we move forward. But we are committed to not just finding a good outcome for the temporary site, but we are also committed to thinking broader term and longer term about the broader issues that we have learned about and that we will continue to think about the unsheltered generally. I believe David Frank may have 2 things.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you, Nuria, and for all your work. Council President, council members, some of the very next things that we will do, we'll be working with our colleagues in finance on what the source is as we continue to refine the budget and understand what this will cost, so we can bring forward that to you, whether it's on the 24th of October or sometime as soon as we can, so you can make an informed decision with as much information as possible about the specific costs and where that money is coming from as we head into the budget season. Before you, either at the very next HPD or potentially walked on to an upcoming council meeting, are some very technical and specific requirements for the affordable housing project that will start in May. If we start work or perceived work on the site before having actions from you, it could be troubling for the financing of those that very complicated project. So we will probably have things for you that sound like, because we're starting this project sooner than we thought, please pass this resolution. So we'll have some of those. We'll be negotiating a lease or some similar agreement between the City of Minneapolis and the Red Lake Nation for the property where the bulk of the Interim Navigation Center will now be located. We'll be placing orders for material. We'll be talking to contractors and, of course, to volunteers and other providers. And tomorrow, in fact, we have meeting with to figure out that mix that I was talking about between property management and the services at the Interim Navigation Center, the navigation part. We have a meeting about that tomorrow. So the work continues. Those are some of the very next things. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other urgent questions for staff before we adjourn? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries, and we are adjourned. Thank you again for everyone who came today.
So, can we?